In case you haven't noticed, I'm weird. I'm a weirdo. I don't fit in. I don't want to fit in. Have you ever seen me without the stupid hair on? That's weird.
Okay, before I start this video, these glasses are fake. I really only wear these glasses in videos where I am talking for a long time and I want to sound extra intelligent, but also because sometimes your girl is insecure about her face. And a great way to hide insecurities about your own face is to just cover them with more things. Makeup, hair, glasses. You're welcome. Now, before we start the main meat of this video, I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory on Jughead Jones as a character. He first appeared in the Pep comic series, the number 22 issue in 1941 with his best friend Archie. He was one of the very first characters to be involved in the Archie comic series. It was so popular that Archie eventually got his own series, and Jughead did as well in 1949. The main writer for his comic series being the main for Archie as well, which was John L. Goldwater. A list of themes that persisted in the Jughead comic series at this time was his appetite for burgers, his insatiable appetite for food in general, Ethel, who had a crush on him, and him trying to avoid her, and his attempts to do that. Also, she was called Big Ethel in the comics, so yikes. He was usually viewed as a woman hater, thinking of them as less than. We saw that especially with Ethel, but he kind of would always ignore the girls that Archie Andrews would go after. He always thought of Archie as kind of silly for going after women. He would get in a lot of conundrums with his best pal Archie. He also ended up being very touch-adverse. He didn't like being kissed or hugged or touched, especially by other women, and a general uninterest in romantic relationships. Like in the first installment of Jughead Jones, he never really experienced romantic attraction. In 1987, we got the first relaunch of the comics, and we see the same whole Jughead being kind of shifted and turned into less of a woman hater, because they were starting to notice that a lot of women were reading the Archie comics, and it may look bad if, you know, Jughead's calling them stupid. Was shown to start to have romantic interests on rare occasions, kind of to battle against this whole idea of him being a woman hater. He even had romantic interest in Ethel a couple of times. He also got a younger sister named Jellybean in this time of the comic series. That's also when he got his dog, who was named Hot Dog. Then, in 2016, there was the new resurgence of the Archie comics, and this is the version of the comics that we still have today. Honestly, this version of the Archie comics is really cool. They're kind of really making sure that the Archie comics have a little bit more of a story to them. Of course, you can still go to any Walmart or any corner store and buy your, you know, dollar Archie comic, but now you can go to a comic book store and you can get a full story about the Archie and friends and them actually going on adventures and them being teens. Or they have their horror series, which is one of my absolute favorites, Afterlife with Archie, which is so good, and the art in that one is gorgeous. You have Vampironica, which is another really funny comic. You have Jughead the Hunger. There's many more, but those are the ones that I've read, like, on the top of my head. And also in these issues, in 2016, in Jughead's standalone issue, him and Kevin are having a casual conversation, and Jughead comes out as asexual. This should be done, right? Like, this is the logical conclusion of a touch-adverse loner independent character who was never correctly identified until now. And now his sexuality isn't dangling over our heads like it's been all this time. Now, this is slightly different than the story that I just told you. That was a brief overline of a whole character. Now I want to get into specifically Jughead's romantic attraction and why it was written the way it was. Jughead has always been the goofy sidekick of Archie Andrews' straight man. Get it? Because Jughead is not straight. While Archie was going around being enamored by every single girl who crossed his path, Jughead always seemed to be above it all. This caused Jughead to never really date any girls and just have other adventures besides that. His storylines were never really about that. In regards to the whole woman-hating aspect of Jughead, by the 1987 relaunch, they realized how many girls read the comics, so again, they tried to kind of backscale that. Now, of course, asexuality wasn't necessarily a thing at this point, so I don't think any of this was them actively doing it. They kind of started to realize that they had to make him less of a no romance, no sexual thoughts guy and into a little bit more of that kind of character. They wanted to try it out, which I think is absolutely fine. Characters are allowed to try new things. Now, one thing I must remind you guys of now is that these comics have been written by so many different people through the years. These characters have always been reimagined and redesigned by different people. So if I give you some examples now, none of these are all canonical. None of these are all set in stone. They can all be changed, they can all be altered. It depends on who is writing the words. Started to show romantic interest for Ethel on rare occasions, and he eventually fell in love with her and got married in The Married Life with Archie, and the issue Archie Marries Veronica, which is confusing. In the issue Food Phobia, Jughead confesses that he doesn't hate girls, he just loves food more. And in this issue, Archie and Delton Doiley, they kind of realize that Jughead's reason for eating so much is because he gets nervous around girls, so instead he'll just stuff his face with food, which is kind of cute and endearing, and it actually and when they reveal this to Jughead, it actually makes him lose his appetite, which is very, very funny. And then in A Last from the Past, written by Nate Butler, we have Jughead explaining that the reason he doesn't chase after girls is because of a childhood heartbreak that happened before he moved to Riverdale when he was a little kid. He befriended a girl named Joanne. I'm just gonna call her Joanne, but it's spelled Joanne. And they had, you know, like a little puppy love relationship, but he had to move to Riverdale. He promised that he would never endure a heartbreak again, so he kept a picture of her in his wallet and he swore off women. It's like not that dramatic, Joe. You can have a long distance relationship. Also, you guys were probably like 5. Like everyone had like a relationship when they were 5. I don't remember that one. Oh my god, I remember that's a big bumblebee. I remember I had like a kindergarten relationship when I was like 5. He made me bracelets like every day. I remember. And he would be like, "Are you my girlfriend?" And I was like, "We're too young." See? I was more reasonable than little Jughead over here. But this kind of idea of him swearing off women changed when a girl named Debbie rode into town. Hi, Debbie. And he began to kind of overcome this heartbreak, but Joanne came back to Riverdale to see him, and now she's like a young woman, and she tells Jughead that she like never forgot about him. But before Joanne and Jughead can have an actual relationship, she leaves town again, but like they promise that they'll keep the love alive and she'll like come back for him one day, which again is so goddamn dramatic. Just call each other on the phones. You're in the 80s, you can call each other. And in this comic, Jughead says sometimes life is just more interesting than burgers and shakes. Now, if what I'm telling you here sounds kind of shocking, like you've never heard this kind of version of Jughead before, is because it didn't last for very long. Avid readers of the comics at this point were not buying these versions. They didn't like the whole idea of Jughead having a love triangle between Joanne and Debbie and Jughead. They much rather that to be Archie's job, because let's be honest, Archie has the much more iconic love triangle between Archie, Betty, and Veronica. So he went back to his kind of independent lifestyle. But of course he also did have a little bit of a flirtatious relationship with a girl named Trula Twist, where she kind of drives Jughead crazy with her ability to predict his every move, and they kind of develop, that love-hate kind of relationship. So Jughead has had 3 girlfriends in the span of the comic book series. Debbie, Joanne, and January McAndrews. Do you know who January McAndrews is? Well, I'm about to tell you right now. There used to be a comic series of Jughead, which they're actually bringing back, which I'm very excited to see what they're going to do with that. It's called Jughead Time Police, which is such a ripoff of Doctor Who, which is so funny to me. Where Jughead goes ahead in time and solves crimes or whatever, and he gets a relationship with Archie's long like, way down the line great-granddaughter, which is kind of messed up, named January McAndrews. Not sure how she got the name McAndrews, but oh well. So that's whack. And of course, we have all those comic book strips that are passed around online from the 1940s to as early as the 90s, showing him being a woman hater and not being attracted to women, and him literally outright saying stuff like that, which I'll, just put on screen for you now. And then, in 2016, he has a casual conversation with Kevin Keller about him being asexual. The 2016 storyline of Jughead being asexual was written by a man named Chip Zdarsky. Now, when Riverdale was coming out, there was an excited stir about Jughead. Honestly, he was never a character I truly cared about until Riverdale came out. But I might get into that in a little bit later. People were excited to see whether or not Jughead was going to be asexual or not. But the problem with this is, because of course he didn't end up coming out as asexual, we kind of had to ask this question to ourselves: who's the real owner of Jughead's story?
I think it first and foremost, this conversation deserves more time than something that we can quickly do here, but there are two forms of representation Jughead has received over time. In Zdarsky's Jughead, he's asexual. That's the only Jughead where he is asexual. He's aromantic in the digest, which is a different thing, but deserves attention as well. But what I found when I was really diving in, because once we started putting Jughead and Betty together, I started doing research to see if that was a narrative that even existed in the digest. And it turns out it is. It's a narrative that's existed for a long time. There are a handful of digests in which Jughead would say things like, oh, Betty, if I did like women, I guarantee you would be the one I would marry outright. You are the best person around. And say these things that, are really romantic and cute, with an appreciation for Betty. And I think it's become clear to me now that Roberto has taken off with that trend.
Every single one of these renditions that I've shown to you has explained Jughead's asexuality or has addressed it. Some just flat out say he doesn't like women. Others say that he nervously eats to distract himself from women. So many people give the creative liberties to find a reason for Jughead's asexuality. It's not necessarily bad. It simply means that different writers and illustrators have different versions of Jughead's character. And because of that, there's so many different versions of the same character. Archie, into the Archieverse. Archie and Friends has been going on for so long that they have to change things up about the characters, or else it would have died out decades ago. And I guess what I'm trying to say here is that change is a good thing. The original creation of the characters was super flat and super easy to work with. I'm sure anyone right now can think of the comic book Archie characters and name a personality trait about them, or even name a little adventure they can go on, no matter who you are. Like, Archie Andrews is clumsy. Betty is naive and sweet and the girl next door. Veronica is snobby. And Jughead is lazy. And with that, you can make so many storylines based on that. But of course, and time again, you have to change things up to keep it new and fresh and inviting to a new audience. So I think what I'm trying to say here is that it's okay for things to change. And I think Chip's new idea of Jughead's character was the pinnacle of that change. It was addressing the parts of him from the past and bringing them into the future. A new set of possibilities for Jughead, about exploring dating while also being asexual, about exploring the asexual culture, about all these different aspects of that identity. So I think the other question to ask is, why did we go in the complete and utter different direction? I can show you so many clips right now of Betty and Jughead smooching it up, like like they're making out, about to have the sex. I think it's safe to say that Bughead is a pretty popular ship. If you don't know what Bughead is, it is the ship name of Betty and Jughead. If you have watched my YouTube channel for more than 5 minutes, you will know that I don't like Bughead. Now, most of my resentment of Bughead comes from, you know, Jughead's asexuality erased, but a lot of it also comes from they have no chemistry. And if anyone in the comments tells me that they're dating in real life, and of course they have chemistry because they're dating in real life, just because you're dating someone in real life doesn't mean you're a good actor.
Including Kevin, including Veronica, are people that 2 months ago I would have actively shunned.
Why?
In case you haven't noticed, I'm weird. I'm a weirdo. I don't fit in, and I don't want to fit in. Have you ever seen me without this stupid hat on? That's weird.
Why are you getting so upset? It's just a party, Jug.
It's not just a party. It's the fact that you don't know or even care that this is the last thing I would want. You did this for you to prove something.
To prove what?
You're a great girlfriend. I don't know. Doesn't it ever occur to you just how different we are? Like, on a cellular DNA kind of level? You're a straight A student.
You're a cheerleader? For God's sakes.
You're the perfect girl next door.
I hate that word.
I'm the damaged, loner outsider from the wrong side of the tracks. Betty, I'm not one of your projects, okay? Like solving Jason's murder?
No, you're not a project. You're my boyfriend.
Until you're sick of slumming it with me? Or until Archie changes his mind and he says he wants to be with you?
In 2018, Bughead was the number 23 ship in Tumblr's top ships, and number 13 in 2017 when Riverdale came out. Now, no matter how many times I go through my Tumblr and see all the posts about it, trust me, I have looked under the Bughead hashtag and I've tried to look through all of it and tried to get it, but I just don't see where it's coming from. Sure, when you see all the gifs combined of them holding hands, looking deeply into each other's eyes, or making out, it's easier to make a case for it because, of course, if you look at any person making out with another person and someone tells you they're dating, you'd be like, well, I guess. All these moments just feel really empty to me, if that makes sense. Okay, let me give you an example. My favorite ship, oh my god. My favorite ship is Reddy. Richie Tozzer and Eddie Kasprak from the It Stephen King novel. And kind of the movie, but of course in the movie that they're children, so it's like I don't like ship them in like that way, but in the It 2 movie I will ship them wholeheartedly because they will be 2 consenting adults. Yeah, if you are a newcomer to my channel, that probably made 0 sense to you. Now, I was initially attracted to the It 2017 film because it was everything that I wanted in a movie. And after I watched the movie and I was utterly obsessed with it and then watched it 11 more times, not even kidding you, I would look at the film's fandom. And I was surprised to see everyone loving Richie and Eddie as a couple. Like, I kind of noticed that they had witty dialogue together, but I didn't think too much of it. But then I started to read the book and I started to research more online and I realized how obvious the gay subtext was. I'd read fanfiction and my heart would literally burst at them holding hands or like kissing each other or even just the banter between the two of them. And I kept thinking to myself, why do I love this non-canonical relationship that is pretty much canonical at this point, that doesn't have actual groundings in the movie and could be totally fake? They could totally fake out and say, oh no, they were just good buds. Why do I ship this flimsy ship more than I ship an unestablished one more? One actually has characters. Archie and Friends was driven on their ability to keep the characters fairly simple with a few memorable qualities. Like I said before, they all have their very signature kind of one quality about them. And with that, you can create any scene, any storyline based on that. That was actually a really fun thing. When I was a kid, I lived in a neighborhood and 2 of the guys in the neighborhood were obsessed with the Archie comics. And we'd talk all the time. We'd make up our own Archie and Friends stories. But in Riverdale, no one actually has a personality. I don't remember the last time a character directly just act on impulse or out of emotion. Rather, all the characters' actions are justified by the world around them. Sure, Betty hates losing control. That has always been a big part of her character trait even since the comic books. But of course in the television show, it's called her darkness, which is just some, translate that to mentally ill. Underline that with a big Sharpie. Her hatred of losing control causes her to lock her mom in the bunker. And in the audience perspective, this action makes sense. People like Edgar Evanever keep telling Betty and telling the audience that she's losing her mind. And yes, she definitely is, but in a narrative standpoint, Edgar Evanever has been destroying her life for the past few months, and she needs to take extreme measures to get her life back to normal and to get her mom to listen to her. Jughead's loyalty to his family, which has always been a key component in his character ever since the comic books, is definitely shown in him cutting off an ex-serpent's tattoo to show the loyalty to his friends and his tribe. But in a narrative standpoint, this is literally the only way he could have gotten out of solving that problem, because that serpent lady, Penny whatever, was going to ruin everything. These two choices don't create character. They just move the plot along. They're just the crazy thing that opens up an episode. All these actions are used to manipulate the viewer into thinking it's cute. You know when you're watching Riverdale and you're watching a cute moment between Jughead and Betty, and it's a cute handhold or it's a cute touch of the face or a cute kiss, but you feel like it's kind of empty and nothing's actually happening? It's because the actions that they're doing are used to manipulate the viewer into thinking it's cute. I think why Jughead Jones's asexuality and possible aromanticism is such a divided topic between yes and no is simply because of what he's become now versus what he was in the comic book series. Now, I really must say now that I am no way standing up for the old comic books. They were great and I love them a lot, but they did shoehorn Betty and Veronica as petty rivals because they're both girls and girls have to be obsessed with guys. And the only things that they actually talk about together are fashion. Midge's name in the comic books is literally Big Midge. Yikes. But it also did a lot of pretty cool things, even though it did some pretty crappy things too. Chuck Clayton was one of the most constant portrayals of a nice, kind black guy that we would see rising in the 60s and 70s, which was not a great time to be a black person. Kevin Keller's character came out as recently as 2010 and has made a huge cultural impact on Archie and Friends. He was made sure to be introduced as part of Archie's gang, showing to the readers that even in the smallest way, and the American public, that kids that didn't fit the mold that were gay could still be a part of Archie's cool kid gang. And Archie is the quintessential American hero, the quintessential American guy. So if you're part of Archie's gang, you are welcome in America. I'm Canadian, why am I even talking about this? If Kevin Keller was introduced and came out as early as 2010, why can't a character we've known since the 30s, who came out a mere 6 years after Kevin, couldn't be given the same canonical service? So why can't Jughead, who came out a mere 6 years after Kevin, be not given the same canonical appreciation? And this character we've known longer than Kevin. Different. It's difficult. At this point, I can kind of understand both sides of where this pendulum could swing. I'm really trying not to get angry in this video. I got a comment a couple days ago that was actually someone saying, Jughead straight, like, move on. And that really struck a chord with me, because I think this is what's starting to happen now. Instead of this being an actual topic we're going to talk about, we just have to dismiss it, because it's never going to happen. The writers of Riverdale had come out before saying that, oh, Jughead is going to be a romantic sexual guy at the beginning of the show, but that could change. He is figuring out his identity. We are 3 seasons into this show, and clearly nothing's changing. And I think that's because Bughead was created, because Bughead was super popular and now they can't really go back. And again, I'm really trying not to be bitter in this video, because I know that it's going to drag people away from the points I'm making. And even though the majority of the fan base for Bughead is teenage fangirls, and it's very easy to make fun of teenage girls, I must remember, I indeed am one. For a couple more months, yay! Then I'm gonna be an adult woman! Then men will take me seriously. Woohoo! But I can see why Bughead stans are okay and even excited for this new imagining of Jughead Jones. It was taking a character that was fairly two-dimensional in the comic books and making him into a natural progression of what he had. It was actually really simple to take his core comic traits and match them up to the traits in the show. Though they're a bit silly, it's actually a very natural progression. Okay, let's do this. I just snorted a lot of cocaine. He eats a lot at Pop's. Pop's chocolate shop. Pop's chocolate shop. Maybe he spends a lot of his hours there, doing some kind of activity. Ugh. Okay, we'll work on it. We'll work on it. Okay, his best friend's Archie. So let's make him like a super loyal person who's really close to the friends in his life, like his loved ones, his friends, everyone. Oh my god. And then like, oh my god, it's like his pact. Like, ugh. So in the comics, he plays a lot of tricks on Reggie. Okay, so instead of Reggie, because Reggie isn't evil anymore, because apparently we're stupid and we took away such an interesting character arc for such a fun character in the comic books, let's have him hate anyone who's like a con artist, because that's really complex. People hating people who wrong people. Okay, I'm so fucked up. Okay, so in the comics, he's like a loner. He's outside of the main love triangle, and he finds all that nonsense a tad silly. He's an emo boy. He's weird. Write this down. He's weird. He's a weirdo. Karen, are you writing this down? He's weird. He's a weirdo. He doesn't fit in, and he doesn't want to fit in, Karen. He doesn't want to. Have you ever seen him without that stupid hat? That's weird. That's so weird. I know I got a tad cheeky at the end there, but honest to gosh, if that wasn't a spot-on character description of him, then I don't know how to help you. But even though I can begrudgingly agree with this new imagining of Jughead Jones, I can't help but feel the other side of this argument. I feel that at this point in Riverdale's 3rd season, and Jughead clearly not being asexual, and clearly they're not going to introduce that concept anytime soon, it's becoming more and more shushed, kind of tucked away and just told to be quiet. With all the things I understand about how Jughead has become the way he's become, I can't help but think about how lazy it is. And also how unsurprisingly he turned out to be a romantic heterosexual. Remember that there was this whole hype about Cole Sprouse before Riverdale? It was insane. He really was one of the first like soft boys that was really palatable to a wide audience. Like people like Ezra Miller are a little bit too androgynous and scary for middle America to like. So Cole was really like that first boom of like, whoa, look at this guy who's inherently like super duper masculine, like he's a soft boy, we like soft boys now. And then the runners of Riverdale were like, hey, teen girls who like Cole Sprouse, have you heard of a show called Riverdale? Watch him be a cute boy. And then the teen girls watched and they were like, oh my god, I relate to Betty because she's the girl next door and I'm the girl next door and I like this guy but he doesn't even notice me. But don't you worry, girls, because there's a boy named Jughead Jones who's weird and a weirdo. I'm not gonna make any weirdo jokes. Who's a little bit different, and also Cole Sprouse and attractive, and he's sensitive, and he's a writer, and he likes you for just who you are. And girls are like, oh my god, I personally relate to this. Oh my god, I wish that were me. Have my babies. If you ask most teenage girls, they'd probably say they're a Betty more than a Veronica. And that's because that's always who Betty was. She was always the girl next door. When I was a kid, I totally related to Betty more, and I always thought Betty and Archie should have gotten together. But when I look at it now, Archie didn't deserve her. So he probably should have ended up with Veronica, and she just became an independent woman. Yeah. But I don't think the writers of Riverdale understand how hot the lack of touch can be. Now, I have a few versions of how Jughead could have been written where he's still somewhat identified by being aromantic / asexual that could have actually really advanced the show and made it a lot more interesting. Now, my first version, which is my preferred version, is him being full-blown aromantic and asexual. Now, in this example, I've kind of touched on this in my If I Directed Riverdale video. I think it should have started at the beginning, but he's fully established that he is not attracted to anyone. He's not attracted to that whole idea of sex or relationships or dating. He thinks it's all just a little bit boring and a little bit dumb. He is always eating at Pops. He never pays attention to school. He's always sleeping, but he always ends up being really, really smart. He plays video games and he gives sassy commentary to his friends. He is the relatable character, I would say, in the cast. He can even be a little bit more androgynous. Like, I can see him go for a little bit of a grungy eyeliner moment, and maybe even wear skirts like Klaus Hargreave in Umbrella Academy. Honestly, I just kind of want him to be an emo asshole. And I still want him and Betty to be like BFFs. I think they should be the buddy cop kind of situation. But like a whole good cop, bad cop dynamic, but not in the way you think. I think Betty would be the one who would go crooked very fast, like, what did you do with the body? And then like, he would just kind of be in the corner like, okay, we're gonna give her a breather for a second. Hey bud, just tell me where you put the body and I will not let her have you. That could be such a great dynamic and I think they would do very well together. Now, my other version is just Jughead being asexual. This version is the easiest for them to translate to the television show right now, and it could have been addressed at the beginning, but it still could be addressed now. Jughead is dating Betty. It's all established, they're all happy together, but anytime they're like about to make out or they're about to do anything a little bit more sexual, Jughead kind of like takes a step back and he's like, let's watch that movie. Let's go do this. And he always kind of tries to change the subject. Betty doesn't really understand at first as to why like he's being this way. And at first she kind of takes it as like a personal insult. She thinks like, oh, something's wrong with her. Like she did something wrong. / she's like, oh, he's like being such like an asshole. He hates me. You know what I mean? But then she finally asks him and he sits her down and he's like, Betty, I think I'm asexual. And he explains to her that he thinks that she is the most beautiful, amazing, special girl in the whole entire world. And he would love nothing more than to spend the rest of his life with her and continue, you know, what they have. But he just can't bring himself to have sex, or he just can't continue this lie that he's been having. And then like, you know, but they'll do soft things like holding hands and like little hand kisses and little forehead kisses, and they like buy each other like little gifts and stuff, and they like always have hard eyes for each other. I think that would make them just the most softest couple, while also teaching the audience that, one, relationships don't necessarily have to involve having sex, and that asexuals can have relationships. And I think that would educate a lot of the teen demographic that watches the show, and can make some very interesting situations. Because that wouldn't change a lot in the show, honestly. Like, them having their sex scenes are just kind of little add-ons that they just add on to episodes to stretch them out / get those ship edits out. But I think that could be added with a lot more context. Like, imagine a scene instead of them just mindlessly making out in, like, the bunker or whatever, in exchange with them, like, reading books together and, like, I don't know, like, Betty's doing her homework and she's like studying really hard, and Jughead is on the other side of the table and he's bored, so he starts like throwing paper balls at her, and you know, they get in like a little scrap and they cuddle or whatever. Like, that's so much cuter and that develops so much more of a relationship. And the other option is him just full-blown aromantic but still a very sexual man, but I doubt that one would happen. So I guess this is the point in the video where I plead to the writers of Riverdale. I'm not gonna do that. They know what they're doing. This isn't going to aid anything. I think the point in this video that I want to make is that when you're watching television, you always have to be a conscious consumer. Never take what you're watching for face value. Pretty much everything you're watching on television especially on mainstream television, has some kind of, you know, sneaky backstory to it. And especially with queer coding and characters, it can be a huge problem that they are not represented at all. Asexual people take up only 1% of the population, but I firmly believe that's not true. It's just because a lot of people don't even know what that is. And I think if a show as big as Riverdale spread some awareness about the subject. When I started Riverdale in 2017, I hated it. I thought it was immediately a bad show, but there was something so captivating about it to me. I would read them a lot when I was a kid, and I got into them a lot more as recently as last year in a bit. With that, I always seemed to really like to read the Betty and Veronica series. And I guess that was a little bit because I was a girl, so I would just read the girl character series. But as I grow older and as I am developing more of my own personality, I start to relate more to characters like Jughead. I kind of became fascinated with Jughead Jones's character, and I didn't really know why until I started my fair share of high school dating, and I realized that I felt this physical anxiety anytime I did it. Now, of course, I'm a very anxious individual. A lot of it can be attested to that, but I also think it's because I realized that I'm not the most romantic person. Am I saying right away that I am aromantic? No, because I don't know. But I definitely know that I am not completely a romantic individual. Sure, me and Jughead are different, but I read the comics again a lot, and I started to relate to his views on dating. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'd like to thank Riverdale for teaching me more about asexuality by completely ridding the show of it. Fuck you guys.